The light at the end of the tunnel was a rallying cry, and things are getting better and better, and this is fabulous. But in 1968, something very surprising happened to us, and that is, if you've been listening to all the news, we're killing them left and right, and the body count was just wonderful, okay? And the war is winding down. There is a holiday in Vietnam called the Tet Offensive, well, the Tet holiday. Tet is like their New Year. Okay? And traditionally, militarily, when either side has a big holiday, Christmas, Easter, New Year, and whatever their New Year happens to be, okay, there's a ceasefire for those 3 days. And so there was a ceasefire, and in the middle of this ceasefire, suddenly the North Vietnamese attacked, and they attacked in full divisional strength, huge, huge, huge armies. That map that you're looking at on the page, wherever we left it off,
898.
898, okay. Mr. Forsyth, this major attack, if you look where the orange begins, okay, the second city down is Hue. Hue was the old capital of Vietnam, okay? Well, the North Vietnamese completely conquered the city. Huge surprise, nobody expected that, okay? And way down at the bottom, notice you've got Ho Chi Minh City today. Back then it was called Saigon. The American embassy was there. Literally, they got into the American embassy. One of the problems, it turned out, was that some of our own Vietnamese people working in the embassy were actually double agents working for the communists. Okay? The point is, the Vietnamese the communists actually lost many more soldiers than we did. Okay? But the country had been told that, you know, it's winding down, light at the end of the tunnel, we got them on the run, blah, blah, and suddenly the whole country, all of Vietnam is exploding with the other side, okay? And it really kind of broke the back of American morale back here, okay? At that point, some liberal Democrats, 1968 was presidential election year, Lyndon Johnson was running for re-election, okay? Some liberal Democrats voted to oppose, well, decided to run for president. Eugene McCarthy was one of them. And elections back then started in New Hampshire primary. And McCarthy's a nobody. Okay, the senator Tom anybody even heard of, and he got like 40% of the vote. And this is a sign of how unpopular Johnson had become. I should have mentioned that Johnson's vice president in 1964 was Hubert Humphrey, who was a very, very great American liberal. Okay? The other side had a delightful slogan, vote for Johnson and Humphrey. So that was it. Anyway, Johnson decides he's not going to run again, but he's got to try to wrap up the war, and it's too much to both try to wrap up the war and run for president, so he bowed out. That was amazing. Okay. At that point, Robert Kennedy decided to run for president. Shortly thereafter, Lyndon Johnson, Martin Luther King was assassinated. Okay, a very bad racial situation in the country. Kennedy manages to win the California primary. It's clear that Kennedy's going to be the nominee, and the night of the California primary, Kennedy is assassinated. Okay, at the Democratic convention, it turns into a brawl. It's a terrible thing. Literally, inside the convention, you've got the delegates voting. Outside the convention, you've got young people picketing. There's a riot going on. The police go charging into these kids, starting the riot. It's just a disaster. And eventually, out of that, the Democrats nominate Humphrey, who looks like he has no chance in hell of winning. The Republicans nominate Nixon, who had run against Kennedy back in 1960. Okay? Nixon wins in a squeaker, saying that he's got a secret plan to end the war. Okay? The secret plan winds up actually meaning that the United States does incursions into Cambodia and bans Hanoi, bombs Hanoi. That goes on for 4 more years, but finally Nixon is reelected, and the United States finally settles the Vietnam War. Very simply, we will get out. We will leave behind a South Vietnamese government with a lot of our aid, and we hope it all works out. Okay. Nixon, you may know, winds up getting involved in the Watergate mess, okay, which really, really weakens him, right? And eventually he's forced to resign. Ford becomes president. Things pick up very quickly in Vietnam, the North Vietnamese streaming in. We had said that if they came back, we would go back, okay? But the Democrats are totally in control of Congress, and they say enough is enough. And if you ever see the Broadway play Miss Saigon, you'll have a sense of what a mess it was as Saigon finally falls and the communists take over, and that's the end of that, okay? Which almost immediately disproves the domino theory. Because who do the Vietnamese wind up fighting next? They wind up fighting the Chinese communists, okay? If you look at the map, okay, just north of Vietnam is China, okay? There is some dispute over that boundary line. And so what you start to understand that is really, really important is that, yes, parts of the world are democratic. Yes, parts of the world are communist. But you know what? Within each one, they're also nationalists. And so that the Vietnamese, why should they be dictated to by the Chinese? You can't see on that map, but if you if you turn to page 870, you see right next to Vietnam in the water, it says Vietnam, 1954, okay? Around where the T of Vietnam is, there are a handful of islands called the Spratlys. Literally, they are rocks sticking out of the water. And they're not big enough for houses or anything like that on them, okay? Whose are they? Vietnam says they're Vietnam's.
There are rocks.
Not this time, but once we're.
And they just blow them up, there'll be pieces floating in them.
Well, Vietnam says it's theirs, China says it's theirs, and the Philippines says it's theirs. By the way, the China that says it's theirs is both the communist China, which is in gray, and pink. See the little island in pink? That's Taiwan. Also, they say it's theirs. Okay. Who cares? They're only rocks. By the way, they're fighting over this.
Yeah, but there are rocks.
Huh?
It's like, yeah, but there are rocks.
So, I mean, what's the big deal?
You can't even paint that on a map, so rock.
Anybody want to know why that's a really big deal? It's not just let's have problems. Many countries in the world today have a boundary that includes water. Okay, for example, the United States, one of the important Republicans was William F. Buckley, who was quite wealthy and wanted to know what marijuana was like, but he didn't want to break the law. So he took his yacht and went out past 3 miles into the Atlantic Ocean and smoked pot, and then he came back and he had not violated the law. Okay?
We all know what to do in the summer.
The law is the law. If you can get away without paying so much income tax because you can do this, that, and the other thing, for example, if you have a house and you deduct the cost of your mortgage, okay, can the rest of us complain that you're getting an unfair deduction? That's the law. Okay, when Mitt Romney says that his income tax is only 17%, the average is like 20%, he's not cheating anybody. He is just doing what the law says. Okay, I mean, obviously it helps to be able to wealth enough to write the laws, but nonetheless. Anyway, the United States claims a 3 miles of water around the United States is American territorial water. Okay, right. So who cares? What do those rocks have to do with anything?
They can be used as strategic locations to attack them.
Well, then you 3 miles past the rock.
All right, notice if those are my rocks, then I have 3 miles, okay? Excepting that most countries nowadays don't say 3 miles, they say 200 miles. Okay? All right. So notice if I own those rocks, I own the 200 miles of water around those rocks. Big deal! So I want fish.
Well,
Maybe there's
Notice The Gulf of Mexico, why do we care about that? Because there's oil underneath, and there may well be a lot of oil under there. And so Vietnam and China have regularly clashed. They're little boats shooting at each other. The Philippines every so often goes in for a shot. The pink Chinese, they don't have enough of a navy to do anything. But these are issues where all of a sudden it's nationalism, it's economic. It's not we're all communist brothers, and what it matters if my brother over here owns the island or my brother over here owns the island. After all, one big family. Forget that. Okay. So nationalism is run down. I do want to just say one quick thing, which I mentioned to Rick while you were gone. Among the Vietnam things that were kind of interesting was that eventually the Vice President of the United States, and probably the big driving force in the war in Iraq, was Vice President Cheney, who we know has just gotten an open heart transplant at 71 years old, and usually after 65, it's kind of it's considered you've had your shot in the sun. Okay? He has some comments to make on Vietnam because he was a college student at that time. When the war began, he got infirmed as a college student, and then, as I mentioned, they made it so that college students would still have to go if they didn't get married, so he got married. And then they made it so that you would have to go even if you're married unless you had kids, and so he had kids. And eventually they asked him about it, and he said, quote, okay, I had better things to do with my life than go and die in Vietnam. Okay? But when it came to the Iraq War, he had no problem sending other people's kids to die. All right, so there's a certain amount of slime that certain people exude, and I think he's one of them. Okay? All right, well, I want to talk now about, all right, so we wrap up the Vietnam War, and basically the United States is out of there. It taught us a very serious lesson, okay? And that is, before you go into war, you better understand a number of things. And something called the Powell Doctrine, but I'm not sure that I'm able to replicate, but, so post U.S. military policy. Anybody know who Powell was? Yes.
He's the Secretary of Defense, right?
Yeah, before that, he was the Commander-in-Chief of the American military, and therefore he's speaking from that point. Okay? And what he says is, number one, okay, no. Your objective. Today that's called mission creep. No mission creep. Which is what happened in Afghanistan, where we went in together with the Taliban, and then we were able to knock out the Taliban. While we're here, let's install democracy, and so the mission changed from one thing to another. So keep your eyes on what you're there to do. Okay, obviously do it and get out. Okay, number two. On the line support. That includes soldiers and financings. And number three, okay, is make sure overwhelming strength. All right. Before this point, so from roughly 1968 to about 1990, okay, the U.S. Is afraid to fight. We might have another civil war, another anti-war. So we look kind of weak. Okay? But not too long from now, we'll be talking about the first war in Iraq, which was when Colin Powell was the head of our army, and George Bush Sr. made sure of all those things. It was a very short war. The war lasted, I think, 99 hours. Okay, we had overwhelming force. We went in. We had allies. They paid for it, and it really was a brilliant war. Okay, George Bush Sr. probably deserved to get reelected, but in America, people vote on things like He didn't know what a scanner was to buy groceries, because he never bought groceries, and he seemed so very out of it that, is this the guy who wanted to be president? And so Bill Clinton, this one spokesman guy, became elected. Bill
That was
Clinton,
the Gulf War?
Huh?
The Gulf War you were talking about?
The first Gulf War, yeah, was this guy, right? So anyway, that takes care of American policy. I want to turn to something kind of different, okay? A new idea, and that is ideas in the West. And starting roughly around 1945, okay, you get the decline of Christianity. As you look today in England, for example, England is an Anglican country, Episcopalian, okay? It's almost homogeneously Episcopalian, okay? In England, something like 5% of the population goes to church regularly. Half of all the people in England don't really think there's a God that you can think of as an actual person, as opposed to some sort of force, or nature does weird things. Who understands these questions? Okay. Whereas the more Muslims go to church and go to mosques in England than Anglicans go to their churches. Okay, because the Muslims are still quite religious. Okay, right. And the question is why? And obviously, one of the major reasons is the rise of science. As explanation. And one of the reasons that people are religious, and why do things happen? Okay, how come there's thunder? Okay, well, it's the god Zeus throwing the thunderbolt. That's great. Okay, well, I mean that explained it, right? Okay, as you start to find out about electricity and stuff like that, it's not Zeus anymore. Okay, in Christianity, there are some terrible, terrible questions. For example, a baby who is 6 months old, and there was something in the paper a few days ago about some girl who's around 3 years old, but she's got that rapid aging disease where her body is actually, yeah, okay. Why would a God do that? Well, those of you who are religious,
to make you stronger.
well, that might be an answer. I mean, God is testing you. Okay? If you read the book of Job, and I wish you people would do some reading of this religious stuff, okay? Job is a very good man. He respects God. He's always honored God and all that sort of stuff. And then in the story, Satan appears to God and says to him, I know why people like you. They like you because you do things for them. Obviously, you're buying your friends. And God says, no, that's not true. And Satan says, let's prove it. And so God answers, well, there's Job over there. He's one of my faithful servants. Go ahead and do anything you want to him outside of killing him. And Job first, his family is destroyed, his wealth is destroyed. That's not enough. Okay, he said, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Okay. Then he breaks out in boils, and his own body is completely destroyed. His wife tells him, why don't you just curse God and die? What's the sense of living? His friends tell him, you must have done something wrong. You must have offended God. God would never torture you for no reason wrong. Look in your heart, see what you've done wrong. And Job said, I've done nothing wrong. What can I say? The Lord has given me this body. The Lord is taking it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Okay? And then Satan said, all right. He loves you just because he loves you, and you're not bribing him. I agree. And then God appears to Job. And at that point, Job says, why did you do this to me? And God becomes furious with him. And God says, can you tell me why the Leviathan swims in the sea, why the whale is in the sea? Can you tell me why the bird is up in the air? Who are you to ask me that question? What do you know? And you're a spot of dust. Your job is to shut up and take it. You don't understand the mysterious ways God works. So that kid who was 3 years old and dying of old age, okay, you can't understand why God causes things to happen, right? Well, nowadays we're much less likely to accept, just take it on faith, okay? Especially since science also is taking care of so many medical diseases. I mean, I gotta say that you can go to a faith healer if you have a disease, or you can go to a doctor, chances are better the doctor will take care of you. Okay, so notice the rise of science has a lot to do with this. And I gotta say also, wealth helps too.
Bless you.
And things are good for you. We can figure it out. I have to say that I'm doing my income tax, which is fairly complex. And a few weeks ago, I had some friends over, and my house is 4 rooms downstairs, 4 rooms upstairs, with nobody but me in it, okay? There's books and papers all over it. So I brought all this stuff upstairs, including my income tax stuff. And I don't know where the hell. I have W-2s, I have several W-2s, I have things from my IRAs, there's papers everywhere, there's the stocks that I've sold. And every so often I want to say to myself, I think I'll just say, oh God, please help me find it. But I don't believe, so it's terrible. All right. But things are tough, even But you do need to notice, there's a void. If you don't believe in God, okay, if you kind of doubt the whole idea, well, why shouldn't I steal? Why shouldn't I kill? Why shouldn't I do whatever I want? Okay? I mean, with God, if you steal, God will punish you. And if not in this world, in the next world. But if there is no next world, okay, which a fair number of people, as I say, 50% of the people in England, we are the only country in the industrialized world where religion is strong. In America, something like 80% of people still believe they're spiritual. 20% are not so ardent. Like 10% are atheists, 10% agnostics, and 80% believes something. Okay, and then that goes down to the roughly 2/3 or so who believe in some religion or other. So I'm a Catholic and I believe in the Catholic Church. I'm an Episcopalian, I believe in the Episcopalian Church. I'm a Son of God, I believe in that. Okay. But in the rest of the world, and in the rest of the developed world, it's surprising when people say that they're believing at all. Okay, all right. It leaves the void. What do you do with that? And the answer is what's called existentialism. Existentialism is the philosophy of the 20th century. Okay, its main people are Sartre and Camus, who are French writers, French authors. Although its roots are much older than that. These guys are writing in the 1940s. Okay? But actually, the roots of this are much older, and that is way back in the 1800s. Okay? There are 2 varieties. The earliest one is Christian existentialism. Which traces its roots back to Schopenhauer. He's in the 1800s. As science is making its impact. Things like miracles. In the time of the founders of the American Revolution, science, that was when science made its first big thing. What did Newton have to do?
Physics. Physics.
Yeah, what's he famous for?
Gravity.
Gravity.
The law of
Newton's
gravity.
law.
Yeah, the apple falls, isn't that great? Okay, but it's not just gravity, because it's no big surprise that if I let go of this thing, it's going to fall. Okay, what he did was he connected this thing falling, your day-to-day life, with why the planets are in orbit around the sun. Okay, they're in orbit because the sun is pulling them in, but because they're spinning. If you have a ball on a string and you go like this, and the string breaks, the ball goes flying out. So on the one hand, the planets want to fly out, but on the other hand, gravity is pulling them in, And where they balance is where the orbit is. So notice, it's gravity that's moving the heavens, and also gravity that's moving little stuff. And so you got one law that seems to cover everything, okay? Well, if we all stop and pray that the earth stops moving for a while, okay? Will it happen? And the answer is no, okay? So as far as he's concerned, the world is like a big clock, okay? A clock is a mechanism. God wound that clock up, okay? But if we all pray that it's 10 minutes to 11 right now, nothing's going to happen. So miracles there's no such thing as miracles, okay? Science explains everything or it can't explain everything. This religion is called deism, and it's the religion of Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. And what they're saying basically is there is some force out there. Read the Declaration of Independence. It talks about nature's God. It doesn't talk about the God of the Christians, the God of the Muslims, not okay. It's nature's God. There's some sort of abstract force where Mother Nature does things, okay? All right. Anyway, he's affected by this, okay? And so what he says is you can't prove God. So if you look at the Bible and things like that, there's so many holes shot in what the Bible says that you really can't say, oh, this is true, okay? But, okay, take what he calls the great leap of faith. I can't be proved, but I believe it, okay? I believe anyway. So instead of, one of the things the Catholic Church is most proud of is that if you conceive like 3 principles, everything else that the Catholic Church stands for, they can argue. Thomas Aquinas wrote this great big thing in which it proves everything, okay? If you accept those first 3 postulates, like in mathematics, you have the axioms. If you learn the axioms, then from there you can prove all those other things. Okay. Well, notice over here, you can't do that. But I believe anyway. I feel the presence of God, and that's what really matters. Okay. It doesn't matter if people have disproved parts of the Bible, if people have shown that the world wasn't created in exactly 6 days. This is the age where he's living in, where Darwin is writing and fossils are being found. It doesn't matter. I believe that there is a God, okay? And so that's it. So this is Christian existentialism, which in a way works fine, okay? But the other way, unfortunately, is called existentialism. So it's like atheist existentialism. When people talk about existentialism, they mean this one, okay? But sometimes people talk about Christian existentialism. And this one is, like, it's true that life has no purpose. What is the purpose of your life?
Who knows?
Well, shouldn't you be thinking about that?
It changes.
Well, give me an answer. What is it? What's it right now?
Get an education.
To get an education. Why?
Get a better job. Myself.
That's
More
great.
money.
And when are you doing more money?
In the US, spend more.
Have fun. And where is it all going to wind up?
In the brain.
In a grave.